분명 그대는 나일세 분명 그대는 나일세 나는 미쳤모.
Hello, welcome to our ongoing series of Edu as a key to understanding Korea's ancient history. I'm Steve Shields of the Royal Asiatic Society, and we're here once again with Dr. Kim Young-Duk, Emeritus Professor of Sogang University and 30-year veteran of studying early Korean history. Dr. Kim just recently published his latest volume. It is only in Korean language, and if you're in Korea, you're able to get it through Kyobo and a few other booksellers here. If you are otherwise interested in a copy, please leave a message in the YouTube and we'll have someone try to contact you and let you know how you might get a copy of this. Again, it's only in Korean language, and if there's someone out there who wants to tackle the translation, Dr. Kim might be interested in talking to you. Today we're going to talk about sacred mountains and the role that they have played in Korea's ancient history, even up to the present day. Dr. Kim, where does this sacred mountain begin in Korea's history? Where do we first find this appearing?
You know, it's so surprising. This Chamseongdae in Mani Mountain in Incheon, in Gangwon Island, is actually the site of worshiping God, and it's called Manisan.
Manisan, on
also,
Gangwon Island, okay.
The tradition has been carried to Baekje, and Baekje is a capital at Kanadara, or in Chinese, present Hanam City, you see, right next to east of Seoul City. They still have this mountain called Gomdansan, previously Sungsan, which is actually Idu transcription of the Korean word for holy mountain or sacred mountains, Somari.
So the mountain in Gangwon Island, we now call Manisan. In ancient times, they probably called it Somari.
That's what I think.
And then when those people migrated further inland, they end up with a capital at what is the present Hanam City. There's also in Hanam City, Somari, which dates back to those ancient times.
That's right. Actually, the state called Michi, which lasts until 246 at Incheon as its capital, then moved on to Seoul area until 346, when it was overthrown by Baekje. And Baekje were the same people as the Michi state, and they carried on same religion. So they have this new sacred mountain in their capital, Hanam-si, which is called Kanadara.
The capital before Hanam City, was Uidaesang,
yeah,
which we discussed a couple of lectures ago.
Yeah.
And as we go down through history, we know that from what is now Hanam City, Baekje moved further south to Gongju and then Buyo.
That's right.
And then at Buyo was where the final battles and things were done, and the kingdom was merged in with Shilla at that time. But the tradition of sacred mountains, who is it that they worship? What is it that they did at these, like Manisan in Gangwon and Somari in Hanam?
That's a very interesting, fascinating story. And it turns out in 3rd century, Wei Chronicle of China already recorded about the religious practice of this Korean peninsula. And Samguk Sagi ignored it. And But then Samguk-yusa, another Korean chronicle written about a century later than Samguk-sagi, carries a mythology about the Tangun, which is well known. And so I should review maybe somewhat the content of what's written in Wei Chronicle. First.
You bet, yeah.
You see, in 3rd century, Chinese chronicle called Wisa and recorded the religious practice in Peninsula. And there it says, in May, after planting the seed in spring, people gathered, people gathered to celebrate and worship God. And they drank, danced, sing all night long. And the same happened in October after harvest, thanking God for good harvest and the same festivals, you see. But then it goes on to state that in each state and each country in the peninsula selected a person called Dengri, which is perhaps translated as priest or shaman of all the days. And they are selected among the people, and he served to worship the God from the heaven. And then also it states about the sacred place where a tree was selected, or tall tree, a tree pole was erected, and bell or drums are hung around and made again the same worshiping service, and so on, you see. But then, mind you, this Tengun is the one who serves, worships the God, and Tengun in Idu, it can be translated as Tengri. Again, it means a priest or shaman. And this, interestingly, in Samguk-yusa, which is a century later than Samguk-sagi, carried a lengthy article on this religious practice of Korea, ancient Korea, and talks about Hanin in the heaven had a sun god Hanung, and he descended to the earth, to the ground, to the land, and he has given a birth another person, another priest called Dangun, which is again the Tengri in Ido transcription, you see. So there's some similarity in the legend that talked about in Samguk-yusa and practice written down in Wei Chronicle, you see. But then it so happened that this worship was not only carried in the state or the capital, but also in the country, according to the Samguk, the Wei State Chronicle, but not in Samguk-yusa. Samguk-yusa talks about the Tangun being a priest or shaman that appreciate or worship the gods heaven, and he was also the king of the nation of ancient Korea. You see.
So the king had the double role of being the chief priest, if you will, for the nation.
In Samguk-yusa.
In the Samguk-yusa story.
Not in the Wei Chronicle.
But in the Chinese Chronicle,
right.
It says something a little
no,
different.
It's just a selected person become a priest.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, the Wei Chronicle, that Chinese country was
Yeah.
one of the countries on the Chinese mainland. What time period was that?
This
nation?
This nation was let's begin. It's around 239 to 265 or so.
Okay.
Only 30 or so. Very short
time,
period.
Yeah. But in what we now call China, there were many states.
There
over
were 3
time.
states.
And at that period, there were 3 states. Yeah. Okay. So, but the Way Chronicle now is 1600-year-old document. We still have access to that information
Of course.
in the original
Of
language, which predates the Samguk Sagi, the Korea Samguk Sagi,
900
and
years.
Samguk Musa.
Yeah.
So going back to almost the contemporary record can be very helpful for us to
That's what I
understand
think,
what was going on. Okay.
But then in addition, I can present the archaeological evidence. You see, in Mani Mountain in Gangwha, which is a sacred mountain called in Korean Manisan, but originally it must have been called Somari. So is the picture word for the god, and Mari is mountain. So Somari is the god mountain or holy mountain.
Holy mountain.
Yeah.
God's mountain or holy mountain,
But
sacred mountain.
as we talked about this new state called Michi, which is recorded as Mich Hall in Samguk Sagi, actually lasted until 346, you see.
Mm-hmm.
Although the Samguk Sagi state that it's perished right away as soon as it's founded, which I find is a false record. Anyway.
Erroneous, yes. Yeah.
So Baekje, in the same people as Michi state, they carry the same religious tradition, and yet their new capital in Hanamsi or Kanadara, they set up another holy mountain called this time in Chinese character Sungsan for worshiping God of the heaven. But then also they built Isomari, another holy place for worshiping ancestral gods, you see, at Isongsan. So that tradition has been carried on to Gongju, second capital, and perhaps to Puyo.
Now, do we have any information at all about that Somari idea being taken place in Shilla?
Well, that's a good question, because in Japan, they have this Japanese chronicle called Nihon Shoki, written in 720, and the carries mythology, and their god called Susanoo came down to this world on Shilla's mountain called Soshimari, but nobody knew that Soshimari is the same as Somari of Baekje, and they always thought it's Somari in Shilla, but Shilla in this context is just a fiction. And anyway, this Nihon Shoki carries a mythology that a deity or god called Susanoo, the brother of the highest goddess Amaterasu, was banished to this world, and the first place he descended was Shilla's Soshimari. But I found this is a fictitious idea of Shilla, and Soshimari is non-existent in Shilla, but then also in Baekje area only. And it so happens in southern coast of the peninsula was occupied by the immigrant or the Michi state or brother state of Baekje, the same people. And they had their own tradition of holy mountains. And Somari or Isomari was replaced by Kushiburi or Kujibon in these days. And that means marvelous mountain, and that's where the ancestral god supposed to be worshipped, you see. But then I still did not find the exact location of Somari in southern coast.
The southern coast.
But then these people, this idea of Somari in Japanese chronicle can be related to gods of worship all over in Japan nowadays. And it so happens in Japanese Shintoism, the shrines all over in various many places has somehow worshipped this Susanoo as god of Somari by some mixture of Buddhism.
Okay.
You see.
Well, as we know, Buddhism was rather syncretistic, and so when Buddhism arrived in this region of Asia, they merged in with existing things very comfortably, it seems. So it's not a surprise that we find that mixture also in Japan.
How true in
Yeah.
Japan, after the Buddhism become a dominant religion, not only Shintoism next to it, and from 5th century on, they imposed Buddhism, the temples to be inside the shrine also. So there's a mixture of the Buddhist deity and the Shinto deity all mixed up.
Mixed together.
So somehow it so happens the Somari could be written in many ways in Edo and in Japan, as well as in Korea sometimes. And this So is cow, you see. So Chinese character cow is for So. Mari is in Korean, it's indicate head, you see.
Like in Korean, modern Korean, be mori.
Mari, yeah. In those days, Mari.
Mhm.
So Mari is sometimes transcribed in Chinese character cow head, you see.
Mm.
And so happens in Buddhism, cow head is name of one of the heavenly king. He is in Buddhism, you see.
Mm.
So there's a mixture. Interestingly, in 656, just before 6 years before the fall of Baekje, the Koguryo monk called Idishi was sent to Japan as an ambassador, you see. But then with all these wars and so on, he settled down in Japan, eventually got married, and he set up a temple, Buddhist temple called what do you call it? Gyeong, you see. And it so happens that there was a mixture of cowhead heavenly temple of Buddhism with the cowhead or Somari or of Japanese holy mountain, that all mixed up. And somehow again the god Susanoo who descended on this holy mountain was mixed up with this Buddhist heavenly god, you see.
Mm.
But then this heavenly god from Buddhism was a sort of evil deity, you see, spreading all the plague in the first. But then somehow in Japanese way, try to placate him, entertain him, to make him more protective god, you see. So they started this festival in 1200 years ago at this Gyeong temple, and it lasted until today.
Where is the location of
It's
the
in
Gyeong temple?
Kyoto.
In Kyoto.
And it so happens in the Meiji, first year in Meiji era, in 1868 or so, they forced to separate Buddhist temple from Shinto shrine. So this Gyeong temple was named Yasaka Shrine. And so they carried on the same festival for 1200 years.
And it's still done today.
Still, it's
Still
very,
today.
it's recognized as World Cultural Heritage.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mm.
But then in Korea, in Korea period, they were very independence-minded, and the mythology of Tangun was, I think, believed in. And King Wonjeon in 1200 or so rehabilitated this altar in Manisan. You're going to history of Korea. And in Joseon period also, a couple times this altar on the top of the Manisan was repaired. So this tradition is somehow carried in Korea also. And eventually, during the 19th century, Korean patriots started festival at the top of this Mani Mountain on the 3rd of October, and it's lasting until today. So I would say this Sacred Mountain tradition carries on in Korea, but then also in Japan in a strong way.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And but the tradition in Japan has clear connections with what was happening in Korea.
That's exactly
Before.
Yeah, and this idea of Somari is definitely started from Incheon with the Michi state, and then carried on by Baekje, and then on. But then somehow this migrant from Michi state went to Japan and set up a shrine. And in southern region of Nara Prefecture these days, and they still worship this Somari gods in Somari background, Somari mountain. And I can show you some of the pictures. This is the Manisan with an altar. And this
Let's lift that up a little higher.
And there's Isomari in Incheon, and with all this different arrangement of
Now, when you say Isomari in Incheon, where about? What's the location? Now, Isomari is the second one.
Isomari.
So there's one in Ganghwa.
Yeah,
Then there's one in the
One is-
modern Incheon area.
Incheon area is one is called Isomari. E is added to Somari to differentiate. You see,
Right.
like New York from New York.
Right.
And this is the Songak Mountain in Incheon. They have an altar which is like this, which is an archaeological evidence for this Isomari.
So it's an ancient archaeological relic.
I think so.
Yeah. Okay.
Then at the Isongsan in Hannam-si, they have an archaeological site for this stone altar.
They've also found stone altar there. Yeah.
And in Japan, in the oldest Shinto shrine called Omiya Shrine,
Say it
They
again.
have,
Omiya.
Omiwa,
Omiwa Shrine. Okay.
Omiwa Jinja.
Jinja. Okay.
And they have this mountain called Mimoro, which Moro is Mari.
Mahdi.
And so it's dropped somehow. But the same idea.
Same idea.
Holy Mountain.
Yeah.
They have a cluster of 3 rocks, and they believe this god was enshrined there. And around 15 kilometers south of this Omiya Jinja, or shrine, one is called this Isono Kami Jingu, and Iso means sort of shortened form Isomari, you see.
Mm-hmm.
So they worship ancestral god, ancestral god, and this the shrine called Isono Kami.
Isono Kami
This time not shrine, Jingu.
Jingu.
And I found lately that Jingu is a shrine where this ancestral gods of important household of Japan, you see. So Gu means palace. So
Right.
yeah.
Yeah.
So Jingu
Yeah.
is sort of elevated,
Yeah.
but this Jingu was rebuilt around beginning of the Meiji era also. And interesting is that what you call design, the plot,
The plot.
and in the
Okay.
back, in the north, there's an artificial mound built called Isomari.
Oh,
In Chinese, get the
Yeah.
Isansan,
Isansan.
and it shows again the connection, you see.
Yep.
Somali and
Yep.
Somali
Yep.
in all this place. In Japan, so it is still going strong
Yeah.
in Japan, but
Yeah.
in Korea, only in Manisan.
And at
so
Manisan, they're really only honoring Tangun these days.
Tangun, as I said, was Tengri.
Yeah.
It's supposed to be priest, but nowadays, this Samguk Yosa was sort of believed as he stated, it's the first priest king
Okay.
of
yeah.
Chosun,
Yeah.
built 3 years BC, you see.
Okay.
So it's sort of,
2,300. Yeah. Okay.
But
well,
this is anyway. So in that context, it's just legendary, but still reflects some fact. You see,
reflects facts,
Oh.
and it's still a special place.
it's a holy place.
A holy
yeah,
place still.
for some
And there's many
Tangun
people
believers.
who
You see.
go there. And, yeah.
So this idea of the holy mountains, Mari or Isomari, with all this Tangun or Chongo or Tengri, is a strong religion, still carried in Japan, but not so in
Not so much.
Korea.
Mhm.
So, but not too many people know really all this historical
Yeah.
background,
Yeah.
and I find it very fascinating and interesting.
Well, Korea went through, and when we say Korea, we're using the modern name,
Right.
not necessarily the historical name
Yeah.
of the periods,
Yeah.
but we had the period where Buddhism became the state religion of Shilla, then it became the state religion of Koryo. So a lot of things got pushed to the edges.
That's right.
And then when we had the Chosun kingdom, they basically denounced Buddhism and took in Confucianism and said, get rid of all this old superstitious stuff.
Yeah.
And then during the Chosun era, the Christian missionaries show up.
Yeah.
And that, I think that further pushed some of these ancient beliefs out of the modern mindset. And as we know, the South Korea, the Republic of Korea, has the highest percentage of Christians in all of Northeast Asia.
Mhm.
Japan has maybe 1%.
I see.
China is a little harder to get a handle on because of
Yeah.
the way
Yeah.
religion works there, but
Okay.
it can't be. Some people say it's 2 or 3%. Some say it might be 10%. Still, Korea still has the largest Christian population, of percentage of total population, and I think that influence maybe has affected the ancient traditional beliefs to a pretty large extent here in Korea.
When you find this ancient religious tradition of Korea is still surviving,
It does survive, yes. Yep.
and I find it's a fascinating story.
It is,
Yeah.
yeah, very much indeed.
Yeah.
You know, so once again, we have this strong connection of Michiho, Baekje with Japan.
Yeah.
That goes way back to the 300s,
Right.
modern era. And not only have we found inscriptions that refer back to Baekje and the kings and whatever, we've seen those in previous lectures. We also now have this spiritual religious practice
Yeah.
connection too, which is important because humans are whole people.
Yeah.
There's politics, there's spiritual, all of these things. So to find the connection with the religion and those practices is just one more evidence of the connection of those two peoples.
Yeah, I find it very fascinating,
Yeah.
interesting,
Yeah.
And nobody knew about this holy mountain called Somari,
Somali,
and
yeah.
it became the Manisan.
Yeah.
So it's
And we can easily understand how Mari becomes Mani.
Yeah, that's
The
that's
language
understandable. Yeah.
pronunciations
But
change over
so
time.
is dropped.
But then the so got dropped.
But in the Japanese chronicle, Somali,
Then it's there.
written in a certain different way in different Chinese characters.
Yeah.
But this is Somali.
Yeah.
But no Japanese understand
Don't know
even
what that.
today
Yeah.
what
yeah.
Somali means. you
So I find it interesting
see.
that ancient peoples, when they were seeking the higher power, seeking what modern people might call God, often we find temples and shrines in high places, mountains, and we can find evidence of the specialness of a mountain place in many ancient cultures. So it's not a surprise that we find that also here in the peninsula, because people seem to need to get separated from the flat land to some place closer to the heavens, maybe. I don't know exactly
I
what the
don't either. I don't
anthropological
know.
idea is because I haven't studied that, but I'm sure there is one. And people, when they move around, they take their faith with them. They don't just leave it there and forget about it, so they take it. So as we look at the archaeological evidence, the artifacts that we find in areas of Japan that are clearly Baekje in origin, more and more and more do the facts line up of that connection of the Baekje people populating at least parts of the Japanese islands and developing their own society and culture there. So do you have any final words to share with us about Somadi before we finish our lecture today?
Yeah, well, the more I read about this traditional religion, I find it more credible, you see, and very close religious tradition of Japan and Korea, and it's quite surprising.
Yeah.
Maybe I shouldn't be surprised after all.
Well, after all you've studied and learned, it's not much of a surprise anymore, but it's fascinating to find one more line item in the list of connections.
One final word is this trilogy in Tangun Shinra. The Hwanin is the first one, God, then he has the sun in heaven called Hwanung, and the Tangun on the land. And turns out in the Edu rendition, Han In could be read as Haniri, like a modern day's Hanonim. You see? Then comes his son called Hanung, which in Edu, I read it as Han Su. Su is the male god, you see, in Baekje. That Su is little change up from Su. And so Han is great. So great God again. Then he descends to this world, and the Tangun is Tengri, his son, you see. So this sort of trilogy.
Got a trinity almost.
Trinity almost. So I find this very interesting.
That's interesting too.
But then this is the first time I've tried in Edo rendition of the Hwanin and the Hwano. I'm surprised myself, you see, to find somewhat relation to this god, Ung is the male, you see.
Right.
Actually stand for male. And actually Su is the male god. You see?
Very interesting.
So I just translate that as male in Chinese character.
Right.
Nobody has. But Tengri, Tangun for Tangun was studied by famous scholar Chen Namson in the last century already.
Right.
But not the Hwanin and Hwano.
Not the Hwanin and Hwano.
It's very interesting.
Well, very good. Well, thank you very much, Dr. Kim, for your sharing today. Thank you for joining us, and we hope to see you next time. Have a good day.
나는 미처 몰랐네. 나는 미처 몰랐네. 않네